my screen now because today I'm talking about the Memories in Time project. And it seems a really good month to do this because this month in September is Save Your Photos Month. And I know I've been doing a few things with groups. We did a freebie the other night for Talking Family History about identifying photos. We're doing couple of other things during the month with that as well. But it's not just photos that need to be saved. And this was a Facebook image in a post that came up a couple of months ago, and I do have permission to publish this. And it just does my heart. So I'm just going to give you a moment to read. And it is that big question is, what do I do with them all? Especially when we don't have room to keep everything. So I'm going to address that sort of through the day and through the session that we're working on here. Obviously, I'm a CMO, and as a CMO, it makes my heart just go, wow, wouldn't that be so cool to have that? Now, I know that lots of you are also CMOs, the Chief Memory Officers in your family. Could also possibly have a subtitle of Chief Hoarder in the family as well. So as we go along, we tend to collect a lot of stuff. And at some stage, we might get to the stage that we have to downsize, which is just scary for Chief Memory Officers to have to do. So I'm going to introduce you to a few things that have come my way, and we'll talk about what else I've done with those. So let me introduce you to Ernest. This is Ernest Partridge. He was born in 1889. He died in 1984. I know who his parents are. But Ernest is absolutely no relation of mine. However, I have a whole lot of information about Ernest. Now, why do I have that? Well, here's me down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and my dad and my granddad and nana. And there's Ernest over the other side of the page with his mum and dad. And as I say, I've got things of his. I've got photos. I've got documents. I've got certificates. I've got references. I've got a whole host of different things. Now, why did I end up with those? Well, my granddad married for a second time to my lovely Susan, and Susan's auntie married Ernest Partridge. Now, they had no children, so somehow the material from them passed to Susan. Now, Granddad and Susan had no children apart from my dad, who was Susan's stepson, who predeceased Susan. So when Susan died, I'm the one doing the clean out at the house. Susan does have a brother. He lives in Australia. And that part of the family took some of the stuff, but not all of the stuff. So as that Chief Memory Officer, my first reaction was, I'll just put it in a box, I'll take it home and I'll sort it out at home. Because at the time, she lived in a different city. I didn't have a lot of time to deal with all of this. So that's what happened. It came home to my house, probably much to my husband's worry, I'm going to call it. So a bit like our first one with the sack of papers, you know, what do you do with this? Well, hiding in this were some photos. So this is Ernest. He's the one in the central photo in the middle. So here's him with a group of people. Here's him with a school group, I'm assuming. It says on the rugby ball it's the ASFC in 1925, and the photographer, when you go down and you actually look at this, tells me they're in Ashburton. So I was able to find out a little bit of information. So I thought, well, that's okay. I'll just add him to my family tree. You know, as you do, you just sort of keep adding it on to your family tree. And I thought, oh, well, I'll do a little bit of research on him because maybe I can get a talk out of it. You know, these things happen. So I started researching Ernest. Now, Ernest, as it turns out, was a school teacher. Now, I sort of did know that because I already had, as I say, I've got graduation certificates, I've got his teaching certificate, I've got references that he used as well. Plus, I've got effectively almost like his PhD of when he went and did a big trip overseas looking at other education things. So there's a little education archive sitting there that seems important to keep. So I started adding information that I found to his family tree. And I've done this on Ancestry so that it is sort of available and I can see it. Now with Ancestry in this case, I've not only linked things that are on Ancestry, but I've also linked in some articles through web links from papers past. And the reason I've done that is it helps me put his timeline together. Now, I'm big on timelines. In fact, there's a talk that has been released last week on Legacy Family Tree webinars about timelines. So I'm putting his timeline together of where he taught and what position he was in at each of these schools. Now, hiding in some other papers, I had this honours list from Victoria District School in Hokitika, and Ernest Partridge signs it. So that's pretty cool. I've got his signature on something a little bit different. And you know how I said he wasn't really related? Well, he's not. But the reason I've got this honours list is because Annie Thompson's my nana on the other side of my family. So it's really funny how things come full circle to an extent. So actually he is sort of interest to me because he was the headmaster when she was at school, or the rector at this stage. So it started to get a little bit more interesting. And then I thought about this photo a little bit more, because what was really great about this photo is that Ernest had taken the time to put the names of everyone on the back of the photo. So he had written about who was standing up, who was sitting down, called himself yours truly. So not particularly useful if someone else had come across this photo who didn't know who yours truly was. And this is the staff from Ellington School. So you can find out more information, and that's what I thought I would do. Because what struck me is I've got this photo. I wonder who else has this photo and whether the people that are in the photo, their descendants, have access to it. And so out of that was born the Memories in Time project. So it sort of came from that, but it also came from my whole philosophy behind my company as well, which is that yesterday's moments are tomorrow's memories. And this is what I've always sort of had running below everything that I do, because I'm all about preserving yesterday to make sure it's available for tomorrow. And that also springs through into another talk I do about my time traveling machine, which is called a TALIS, because obviously it can't be called a TARDIS. So my TALIS is my red phone box, and it's all about communicating the past to the present. And the TALIS stands for treasuring everyday life, including self. So when I start looking at things like that big stack of documents, it makes me remember my TALIS folder, which is the whole idea of actually keeping some of those as part of our history to pass forward. And that goes as much for ourselves now as it does for the things we're keeping of our ancestors. So it's really cool if you actually keep something to pass on to the future, because I would love to find that stack of documents. So anyway, the Memories in Time project came along, and I decided I was going to put a family tree up on Ancestry and share found items. So the idea was to make them available. So it's a public family tree available to others that maybe are researching those people. Everyone's in the one family tree. They're not necessarily related to each other, but up on the Ancestry, I've said, look, if you want more information, contact me. Because in a perfect world, I would find a descendant who might want to take these things off my hands. And I think, as I say, that would probably make my husband quite happy too. Now, I decided when I first started this, I would put some guidelines around this in my own project plan as such. The first is I was only going to use items where the person is deceased. So I'm aiming to only put things up because I don't want to invade anyone's privacy. I'm not going to trace the family tree down to living people. Privacy thing again there. because if you have living people on your tree, they're only going to show as private or living when you look at an ancestry family tree anyway. But I'm going to leave enough information for the tree to be found. So I'm going to try and put a little bit of stuff surrounding some of those names. And I wasn't out there to contact living people to say I have the item either, because for a lot of those people, maybe they're the ones who've actually got rid of it and they don't actually want it at this stage in their life because they've had to maybe downsize or something like that. So my sort of plan was, I'm going to put it out there for others to ask me about or to take off the website, etc., rather than try and force it back into some family hands. Plus, I don't have enough hours in the day to be finding everyone and doing all of that sort of thing. So item number 1 was that Allenton School photo. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at some of the research process behind this as well, in putting up this into the project. So we start a wee family tree. So I started with Ernest. I've linked his photo in there nicely to him in the family tree. I've built a little bit of family tree around it. And even with just doing that much, I did get a message off Ancestry of someone who is related to his first wife looking for photos. So even getting that much was a really good start because I was able to share a little bit of information with them too. Now, we have Talking Family History, Michelle Patient and I, and we actually took this in as a thing to discuss there a couple of months ago. And we were talking about this photo and all these names. And so the next thing we're all researching together. So let's start with D.A. Breach. So this is the first person in the back row. So if you were going to research this, what would you start to think about? So in the chat, you might want to throw up some ideas of where you might have gone to look. Because I want to get your brains going, because later on, I'm going to get some of you researching with me. So the chat's down the bottom of the screen for those that haven't been in Zoom before. So I'm getting some school roles, death indexes. Yep, those death indexes, really good place to start. Count of the school census, papers passed, New Zealand Gazette. Fantastic. Electoral rolls. Yep, all picking up all my nice favourite things to do, Ashburton Guardian and BDM. So with most of these, in this particular photo, we actually started with birth, deaths and marriages. So this is the historical indexes for those that have never seen this before. And the reason we started here is because this photo is taken in 1923. So these people have to have been born before 1923 and be an adult teaching at that stage. So the really good thing is that means there's no privacy issues with finding their births on the indexes here. So I went Breach, put in a date of 1890 as a good place to start, and found a whole list of people that had that surname. And when I scrolled down far enough, there was one called Dorothy Annie, which seemed a really good prospect to start with to look for a D.A. Breach. So then, like some of you have already suggested, I also went and looked at this on the ancestry rolls for the birth indexes because I wanted to find out the registration place. The fact that Dorothy was had her birth registered in Ellesmere area in Canterbury is really good because Allentown is a school just outside of Ashburton, or in Ashburton. So the fact she's a Canterbury-born girl is probably a good indication that maybe I'm on the right track. So that was good. Then off to our favourite papers past from the National Library. And I know there's lots of you who are just hanging out for this afternoon after this presentation to go and look at the new releases. They are live, so I shouldn't be distracting you with that, should I? They are live, so the press is up there from 1946 to 1961 now, but shh, don't go yet. Stay with me for a little bit longer. So I went searching for Dorothy. There was a few articles with Dorothy in there, but in particular, I found this one in the Littleton Times about teachers' certificates being issued. And here's Dorothy in Ashburton getting a teacher's certificate or a pass certificate. So I felt pretty sure I was on to the right Dorothy at this stage. And we looked a little bit further and there was a great article in the Ashburton Guardian about the school. And right down the bottom, you see that Miss D.A. Breach was appointed junior assistant at the beginning of the year. So she'd only just started school in 1923. So that was a really good place to start. We're able to identify her parents. We're able to identify her spouse by doing a little bit more research. And so we created a floating family tree. Now you can do this within Ancestry so that you have pieces of tree that are all in one tree. They're just not all connected to each other, because Ernest and Dorothy aren't related to each other, so I didn't want them connected. I'll put up some tips on how to do that a little bit later on my blog, so have a look at that to find out how to do that if you don't know already. So we did the same with the others in the photo. So we were able to find out that this is Edna May Humphreys, daughter of Harry and Mary. Would eventually marry a gentleman called Kenneth Taylor. And Miss Humphreys also made the papers in 1923 to say she was a probationer and had been successful in gaining a partial pass in Class D at the teachers' examinations held last August. Now, being that this photo was only taken on the 1st of August 1923, she might have been quite worried at that stage about these exams she was about to sit. So it's interesting even just to start thinking about that as well. Moving along in that back row, we find, back into the front row, this is R.J. Ford, who's otherwise known as Ralph James Ford. Now, Ralph had been appointed to teach there at the start of the year as well. At this time, the school is quite new, so you start to get a little bit of an idea of the history of the school as well. But he's been appointed to a higher position in the school, meaning he got a status rise as well. But also later on in 1925, he regrets that he's leaving the school because he's off to a different school. So it's really interesting to follow teachers through. So if you have teachers in your family, check the newspapers, because there's lots of information about them moving between their schools. It's a fantastic source. His parents were William and Sarah, and his wife was Cora Flatman. Now, a lot of these teachers also seem to be quite Ashburton based. So they tend to have been at the school or around the school in the first place, and possibly even have gone to local schools as well. Now, the next one ended up being a lady called Elizabeth Thexton. Now, Elizabeth Thexton took us a little bit longer to get our heads around, to be fair. You'd think with Thexton as a surname, it would be really easy, but it wasn't, because for starters, she wasn't actually born in New Zealand. She's the only one of the people in this photo that wasn't born in New Zealand. Everyone else was. We know she'd been appointed on the 1st of August. And in fact, this photo was taken on the 1st of August. So this is her first day at the school. And she's nicely being photographed as a staff photo. She left in 1924 to go to the normal school in Christchurch. So we know that about her. But it did take us a wee while because, as I said, we found that she'd been born in Derby in England. She did a lot of backward and forward travel between the two countries. So we found her on quite a few passenger lists. And we eventually worked out that she was the daughter of William and Elizabeth Thexton, and she had married a Percival Hazelman in New Zealand. There might be a few other stories hiding behind there as well. Then we come to our last two. We've got Lancelot Bobbs Galbraith, had been teaching at Newland School and had come down to be the assistant master at Ellington. And then he was appointed a headmaster of his own school. So there's quite, as I say, quite a bit of movement in here. Parents are Robert and Marion. And our last person is Eva Ellen Watson Buchanan. Now, she was nice in that the newspaper article for Eva actually gave us her full name. So we had a bit of a head start on this one as well, because we got that name. She tendered her resignation in 1924, accepted with regret, and she's the daughter of Elias and Helen. Now, of course, there are some nice little stories that came out of this, because what we actually found is the reason that she was tendering her resignation is because she married Lancelot. So at that time, of course, married women couldn't be teachers, so she had no choice but to resign her position. But as usual, in this period of time in the newspapers, you get some really beautiful descriptions of their wedding dresses and what everyone was wearing, really. We know that they got a silver cake fork from the members of the girls' basketball team, and stainless steel cutlery presented by Ernest Partridge to them. So we got some really good information, and we were able to add all of these people into the family tree as such. And I uploaded the whole photo in there. Now, when you're uploading media to Ancestry, you have the chance to write quite a bit. Once it's up there, you can't edit it. So prepare yourself if you're doing something like this. Make sure you've got all that information typed out first of all, because it makes it a lot easier to just then copy and paste. So we put as much information up as possible. So even the fact that I had received this photo from Susan, it's added there to help other people, etc., etc. And we linked it to all those people. And what's really cool to see now is this we did in November last year. It doesn't seem that long ago, but look how many people have saved it to their family tree. And so I had a quick look at some of those as I was writing this talk, and people that are related to Lancelot and Eva, to Ralph and to Dorothy, have all saved this photo to their family tree. And that's sort of what the whole project was about, was making sure that this photo could be shared with all the other families who maybe just didn't have a copy, or maybe didn't have a copy that was named. And that's really important with your photos, to remember that just because you don't have a named copy doesn't mean that no one else has a named copy in the family. So always remember that. Now, to aid that as well, I also sent copies down to the Ashburton Museum, and I sent copies to the school as well, just in case they wanted them. I know that the museum has taken the full TIFF copies that I had scanned as well. So that was really cool, and it was a nice little project, and it's nice to know that it's being used. But that photo was one that I happened to get because of the fact that I had inherited it. There's this other little part of me that really likes secondhand shops. And the problem with secondhand shops is often they'll have a wee box hidden in a corner somewhere of photos and other miscellaneous documents and things. And there's just this temptation to go through it to find things that maybe we can do something with. It's interesting because this was one. This is McGregor, Bona Wright and Agnes Dan's marriage certificate, and that's McGregor there. And I've done lots of talks on McGregor, but I actually found his documents in Smith's bookshop in the Tannery in Christchurch. They used to have these great drawers, and that's where that was hiding. But I'm not going to talk about McGregor today. I'm going to talk about another document that I found. This is an application for a supplementary ration book. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? So what does that even look like? Well, this is what it looks like here. It's a little piece of paper that any kid has filled out. I picked it up in Mayfield in Canterbury. She's in Point Chevalier. So I have no idea how it's managed to get from the North Island down to the South Island in the first place. Plus, I would have thought the fact that she had actually filled this in, you'd think that document should have stayed with whoever you were giving it to. So it's possibly got another little story behind it as well. It doesn't feel like the sort of piece of paper that should have been given back to you when you got your ration book. So the first step on looking at documents instead of just photos is looking at all the information you can find. And actually that's the first step with the photo too, and we'll come back to that. So it's Annie Kidd. She's at 90 Walker Road, Point Chevalier. The date stamp, because it's a little bit faint there, is the 17th of March, 1948 in Auckland. So Auckland makes sense. She's in Point Chevalier. That makes perfect sense. But what other information is hiding in there that maybe you might not pick up at first look? So what else can you see in there that might help you with doing some research into Annie? So if you see something, yeah, so straight away I've got people going, yeah, she's an expectant mother and she's pregnant. Absolutely. Now, remember my little sort of guidelines that I have. I don't want to go looking for her child. Her child is born in 1948. There's a good chance her child is still born. It's not stillborn, but it's still alive. My apologies. So I'm not going to go any further forward in time, but I'm going to try and get it back in time because I'd be quite keen to have this in my family records if it was mine. So first thing I decided to go and look at for this one is because I have a name and a place and a date, I went and looked at the electoral rolls on Ancestry, and I put Annie Kidd in to go and look for her there. I don't know a lot about the electorates in Auckland, so, you know, Graylin just told me that it was in Auckland as far as I was concerned. Sorry, guys, I live in Christchurch. Asked me about a Christchurch electorate instead. But it was great because as soon as I went into that, I found Annie at 90 Walker Road, and right below Annie was Eric Vincent. So the good thing we also know is because Annie is pregnant, there's a good chance she's also married. Now, lucky, because this is 49, if possibly it had been a little bit earlier, I may have found that the husband was off at the war and may not have been home with her. So it may have taken a little bit more research to actually find the two of them together. But in this case, I was able to actually find Eric relatively quickly and put her together with Annie. But I don't know Annie's maiden name. So I decided I would go and use the Wilson collection. For those that haven't looked at it, the Wilson collection is relatively new. It's been up for a few months now, and it has a variety of records that have been indexed, transcribed, coordinated by Diane Wilson with a group of fantastic researchers and volunteers. And in this index, it actually has access to the marriage indexes up to sort of the 1956 era. So I knew that I would find it on here, whereas I wouldn't find it on birth, deaths, marriages if they marry in New Zealand. Always a possibility that they don't. So I started with Kid Eric for my search, searched on that and found Eric Vincent Kidd getting married in 1947 and getting married to an Annie Burke. So this is looking really good because let's face it, 1947 they get married. She's expecting a baby in 1948. It's all fitting together quite nicely here. And I've got a maiden name for Annie, which is even better. Now, the other thing I did notice there, though, as well, is there is another record for Eric Vincent, and that's his burial record at Waikumete. So there's an index for those also hiding on this. But I actually took that information over to the Auckland Council's website to search the cemetery database there for Eric, knowing that he had died in 2006, or was likely to be the one that had died in 2006. And so by searching Eric, and then once I'd searched Eric, I searched Annie, I found the two of them that had, Eric had died in 2006, Annie had died in 1983. They're buried together at Waikumete. So that gave me the two of them together. But it also gave me an age for Annie and a year of death. And from that, I was able to go back to those birth, death, marriage indexes that we used before, look at the deaths, or actually I'm looking at the births here for Eric, and I was able to find his birth. Now, can I say, when we did this, we had a look at this one at Talking Family History a few months ago. Eric being born in 1921 did not show at the time because of the fact that we're in the year that this is all coming through. He has now shown since, and so he's the son of Robert and Elizabeth. From Annie, I was able to find her death and find a date of birth. So she's born in 1914, according to her death registration. But when I went and looked at the births, and I sort of opened this up from 1913 to 1915, thinking it's probably in that period of time, I can't find an Annie that matches to that sort of date of birth and with that exact names. Now, there could be lots of reasons for that. She could be like Elizabeth Thexton. She could have been born overseas, and so she's not born in New Zealand. She could have her birth registered with a different surname because maybe her mother married later in life, etc. And so she's under a different name. There are a whole lot of reasons. And there are some things that I could really go and do. For example, I could go and buy a copy of their marriage certificate and get both their parents' names and their places of birth. However, this isn't a project that I want to spend a lot of money on beyond actually buying the first thing in the first place. So at this stage, all I've done is I've uploaded Annie's ration book up to the Memories in Time tree, said whether I have found it, shared to make it available to Annie Kidd, Nee Burke, transcribed the document and added it to the tree. And Annie currently just sits there all by herself, and at this stage no one has been along and actually attached that document to their own tree. So it appears that there's not a lot of people researching this little bit of the family. And sometimes that can be a really good indication of why no one's kept these documents within the family, because there was no one to keep them as such. So that can be sort of the reason why it's floating in the background there. So let's move on to number 3, the baby photo. So this one here is brand new. No one has seen this apart from me. So this is a baby photo. I found this in a junk shop up in Picton. It sounds like I go everywhere, but I don't. Just flukily walked into this. While the kids were looking at some toys, I found this photo of this little baby. And it was quite cute. And I always like to pick up these things, as I say. Now, one of the things that you may want to do with photos and bits and pieces like that before you start doing anything else with them is do a little bit of restoration work. A program that I'm using at the moment for that is VividPix. It is a piece of software that you can download onto your computer. It's available for both PC and Mac, so it doesn't matter whether you're on a PC or a Mac. And I just want to show you what I did with that photo. So I've screenshotted this rather than doing this live with you. So I can drag the photo from the folder and put it in there, or I can just go open the image as such, as you would normally. And when you do that, this particular piece of software will give you a range of fixes that you can do. And so down the left-hand side here, you've got that it's either a faded print or slide. It's a badly faded print or slide. It's come from a digital camera or a cell phone. It's document or text, or that you just want to add metadata, and we'll talk briefly about metadata. You then get to select your favorite fix. So your favorite fix is by selecting one of these 9 fixes on the screen here at the moment. So I selected one of those. And you can see how that started to bring up some of the colour in the photo. Now, this one wasn't particularly bad. It could have been a lot worse. If you want to play with it a little bit further, the first thing is if you want to bring up the 9 choices again, you can bring those up by clicking on the Reset Corrections button, and you'll get the 9 choices if you want to try a different fix. The other thing you can do is you can set your preferences in the first place for when you're using the program as well. And those preferences include how this should be saved in the future. So it allows you to save images as TIFFs, as full-size JPEGs, and as sharing size JPEGs. The sharing size one being that, say you want to email it to someone, but you don't want that huge file because otherwise it does silly things to emails. You can get a sharing size as well. Won't be as good in the resolution, but allows you to do some sharing with it. But the TIFF is there as an output type, TIFFs being a really good way of saving your photos for the future. The other thing I can do with this photo is I can add what we call metadata. Metadata is information that can stay with the photograph. And in this case, I've just put that I'm the author of it at this stage because it's in my collection. It's a mystery photo purchased at a secondhand shop, and I've done some tagging of this photo as well. And tags are a really cool thing you can do with your photos. And that data ends up saved with the file. So if I'm looking at it in File Explorer, here's my mystery photo. Here's the information that has been saved with this photo. So you can sort of see a before and after what sort of detail is starting to be brought out, because I'm seeing sort of detail here in this area that was blown out in the first one and a little bit more here. If you had something that maybe has jewelry on it or something like that, and you really want to get some of the shadows and bits and pieces, that can help you as well. But let's talk more about the photo and what clues do I have on this photo that might help me identify who this is. Oh, look, someone's already up there doing it. Michelle, you're a step ahead of me, just slow down. Because yeah, absolutely. The first one in here is who is the photographer. It is a little bit cut off to be painful. So we have W.E. Sorel at the Paris Atelier. Now, interesting place, doesn't really tell me a lot at this stage. I couldn't tell you what country that was in. But there's a great blog called The Early New Zealand Photographers and Their Successes. And what's great about this blog is you can search it. And so in this one here, I've searched Sorel and it came up with William Edwin Sorel. And I'm getting, there's people that are related to him as well. That's even better. So we've got William Edwin here, and there's a whole blog about him. And if you go down far enough, a couple of things that you find is that the person doing this blogging has had a collection of photos that as they've found them, they've added them to the blog. So looking at the bottom of this looks very similar to the one that I have here. And it tells me that this is in Colombo Street in Christchurch. So I now know that this photo is likely to have been taken in Christchurch, which is a good start. They've also gone through the newspapers and picked some articles about him. And likewise, I could have gone to Papers Past, but this is all put together for me already. And so it tells me that he established his photographic establishment in Colombo Street in 1894, November 1894. So really quite specific, which is even better. So that's really cool because of the fact that now I know that photo has to be taken after November 1894. That's cool. Right, what other clues might I have on this photo? Let's see if anyone's got some other ideas. Problem with baby photos is they're just not really good at telling you anything else, are they? Yep, the background setting and the props could be useful. Not probably going to tell me a lot more than what time this photo was taken. Clothes, some beautiful smocking done on that piece of clothing that that baby is wearing. Do we think it's a boy or do we think it's a girl? Got votes for boys at the moment. Debbie, you're the only one who's actually come up with that as far as I know. The fact that I have this photo actually physically in my hand rather than a digital copy means that I have the little thing that's even better, which is the back of the photo. And on the back of the photo was some pencil marks. Now I've also thrown this up into VividPix because it does really well with documents. You know, think of those 1841 census records and things like that, at making the writing really clear. And so here is the back of the document, and I'm going to make it easy for you because one of the things you can do in here as well is you can transcribe this document. So I've made some comments or notes in here that it's the reverse of the baby photo. I purchased it for a whole $3, and that it says Marion Agatha Emily, the third daughter of C.L. Rivers. So let me show you where we're at. So here we are here. Here's the photo. Here's the back of the photo, enhanced, so that we can have a look at it. And one other thing about this VividPix, when you're using it, is when you edit the photos, it puts them in a totally different folder. So there is no chance of you saving over the top of your original photo, which is fantastic because you don't want to touch your original scan. Now, if you're interested in that VividPix, and I know it's been going up in the chat, I do have a discount code. It will give you 20% off. It's a one-off cost, so it's not like an annual sub. You can install it on 2 computers, and there are PC and Mac versions. So if you're interested in that software, as I say, I'm finding it really useful, not just for fixing the photos, but also for putting on those metadata and tags as well. You've got until the 17th of October to use that link to get the discount. If you're watching this after the 17th of October, please still use the link because it does give me a little tiny bit of money at the back end, which allows me to give free talks to libraries and things like that. So now I thought we might all research together. Now, for me to be able to research with this and for you to be able to see the photo and the names and things like that, I have stuck these up on a page on my website. So if you look at that link at the bottom, the Memories in Time project, if you want to play along and you want to have a copy of the photo up at the same time as we're doing this research together, feel free to go to that website. The link will go into the chat as well, so you can just click on it and open up. And then you will be able to see the information. Now, I'm going to be guided by you as we do this research. So I'm just going to escape out of my presentation, first of all. That's the vidpics hiding there as well. And I'm just going to bring up an internet page. So as I say, if you want to play along, this page here, when you scroll down on it, has the photos so that you can see. So I want to research my photo. Obviously, I've also got the nice photo in front of me as well. And we've got a name. So where am I going first, guys? Tell me where to go next. I'm waiting in the chat. BDM. Okay, so I'm going to BDM. Great. What am I looking? Births, deaths, marriages. Birth of the baby. Okay. What am I putting in the family name box? Rivers. Okay. Great. Do you want me to put in the given name as well? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to put in Marion, if I can type. Shall I keep going with the whole name or just the first name? I'm going to go with the first response, Michelle. Okay, what date do you reckon I need to start looking for? First of the first of, well, I'm going to help you with that one. I'm just going to put in 1890. We know it's likely to be after 1894, but let's start there. And I'm going to submit the search. Okay, no records that match my query terms. Where am I going next? Because this baby doesn't look like, okay, so take out the first name, sure can. Oop, lots of babies. I'll sort them by the registration number. Charles, Hilda, Ida, Ernest. Well, those ones are all before 1894. Jane, John, Lawrence, Alice, William. And then I'm probably starting to get too late possibly for the photo. Yeah, I could put a search to date in as well, Deborah, but we'll just start with this because it's given me enough names, but I'm not noticing any Marians down there. Look for a marriage. Okay. Baby's born. So, yep, I can go and look for a marriage. Put in Marion again. I'm just going to put in 1900. We'll see if that comes up. Yep, I've married her off. So we now have a potential marriage for her to a Morris Edgar Philpott. And that marriage is in 1923. Could she be born in Australia? That's a very good question. What would be a good place that I could go and start searching all the Australian birth indexes at the same time? And the father's marriage. Find my past? Yep, absolutely. Or ancestry. I'll tell you what, since we want to end up on ancestry, let's start over on ancestry, shall we? And in fact, I'm going to go to my tree over on ancestry. So here's the memories and time tree. We didn't talk about this guy. We might talk about him another day. I'm just going to show you how you add a person into this at the same time and disconnect them from being in here. So this is how you can create a floating person. So I want to float a person called Marion. So Marion has absolutely no link to this Alice at the moment. So I'm going to go add family, but I'm just going to add her as a sister. And I've got Marion, Agatha, Emily Rivers, who is female, and I'm just going to save her in there. Now that makes her a sister, so she'll appear in the siblings in here. I'm going to click on Marion now. And I'm going to go up to the edit button up the top right hand corner, which hopefully you can see, because one of the options there is to edit relationships. And I'm going to edit the relationships. And I'm going to delete the father and the mother, because we know that those are all fake. Okay, so now she has no relationships in here. So she's what we would call someone who is floating in the family tree. She's floating. There is nothing that helps her. We can add a spouse. So I can add Morrison here. Edgar. Oh. I do wish they would let us have a marriage date in there when you're adding a spouse. It would be so much easier. We'll let Ancestry done that. No, she's not a sister because I'm just adding her in. She is a sister to someone. And in fact, we know she's potentially the third daughter of someone called C.L. Rivers. But we don't know whether C.L. Rivers is the father or C.L. Rivers is the mother, or how many sons might have come in amongst that all as well. But that is a really good thing, because what we could go and look at, well, we'll just wait for this to see if it can find some stuff in the background. If I go back over to those births and I go looking for Rivers, she's the third. So let's go 1880 instead. Does anyone have a father's name with the initial CL? No, they don't. Does anyone have a mother's name with initials of CL? No, they don't. So not a lot of help happening in our New Zealand births here at the moment. Now, the question is, when you remove the parents as Fiona did, it removes the person from the whole family, so now she stands alone. Yeah. So if I go back to that family where I added her, she's been deleted from the whole family. So that family doesn't have her in there either any longer. I've deleted all her links to that part of the family. So she stands alone. She has no links apart from now to Morris in here because I've added him since. So I've got a possible birth record. Those are always tend to go off to America. So I'm just going to go search on Ancestry instead and see what we can find. This is looking good because this is obviously her. So, and I'm quite liking some of these down here as well, because this looks like it's likely to be her. She does at least have some really interesting middle names. So I'm going to go and pick up that marriage index and I'm going to save that to Marion. Anyone noticing anything there off to the right-hand side as well? Before I push the save button and it disappears off the screen, I'm going to go and have a look at this Papers Past link in the moment. Anything else that anyone's noticing? Different birth surname. Look at that. A suggested birth index. I'm going to right click on that and open that link in a new tab. So it's just going to sit up there and populate at the moment. So I'm going to save this record though to Marion, because I'm quite happy that this is probably Marion getting married. It's a pretty unique name after all. So I'm just going to let that one go in there. Let's go back up and have a look at this birth index option. Okay. Interesting spelling of the surnames. Born in 1896. Well, that fits in really well with the photo being in 1894. Got some electoral rolls as well for a Marion Agatha Emily Deas. So that's quite interesting. I'm just going to, some people are putting some paper links in here. Oh yeah, I know what that paper link is. I might have done a little bit of sneaking around behind the scenes to make sure that we could actually find something before we did this. So we'll come to that. So let's have a look at this birth index, because it does look like her, doesn't it? And if we do go and look up that Papers Past index, and I scroll right down here, we get this lovely notice, and let me just blow that up so you can read it. And so this is a name change. How uncommon is that for us to find, especially when you're doing examples for anyone? So here we have Charlotte, John Henry Paul, Cyril Lawrence, George Victor, Archibald, Florence Ray Margareta, Ethel Ruby Victoria, and Marion Agatha Emily of Medbury, North Canterbury. Settlers give notice that they're changing their surname to Rivers. Now, Would you have gone and looked for Rivers as a surname if your surname had been Durst in the first place? Possibly not. Yes, there are 2 CLs hiding in there as well. So let's go back over to this birth index, because I'm now pretty happy that this is the one that we want. So I'm going to save that to our lovely Marion. You'll notice this says January, February, March, because the New Zealand birth indexes are in quarters. So let's put her in. And I'm going to save this to Marion Agatha Emily Rivers. And it's going to try and tell me it's a baptism in January or birth in January. I'm going to put that it's the March quarter, 1896 in Rangiora. I probably would go and just double check that that's the Rangiora folio number is actually correct as well, if I had time at the moment. I'm going to trust it at this stage because it sort of fits in with that whole Canterbury thing, so it makes sense. But sometimes you'll get some funny folio number places, and I would check those against the registration district guides if you have access to them. So I'm going to save that to my tree. Now, if her surname when she was born is a different name, I'm going to add that in as also known as name. I'm going to add in Durst as another name. And eventually, if I was doing this, I'd probably also add in the web link to that. Oh, now people are starting to whiz along. Okay, so everyone's going off in different directions. I'm going to go back to my births. I'm going to now look up Durst instead. And this is looking a lot better. Third daughter, 1891, 1894, 1896. There we go. There is the birth that we've just found. 2, Charlotte, Lydia, and William. So there's our CL. So that's really cool as well. So I'm going to give her some parents' names now of William. And I'm going to give her a mother's name of Charlotte. Now, has anyone found Charlotte's name? Oh, Land. Thank you very much. So Charlotte's last name was Land. Okay. Now, at this stage, I'm going to add that photo. So I'm going to go to the gallery and I'm going to upload some media. And you can drag and drop your photos in. So I've actually got the photos sitting here. So I'm going to drag and drop the TIFF in, because I can put a TIFF into this. Except my maximum size is too much. So let's go back then. Let's try that again. We'll upload it, and I will just take the JPEG version. Let's try this and see if this will go up. There we go, that's better. I have taken the edited version. I could put the original version up there as well, but I'll just put a note. The place of this photo. So what kind of media is this? It's a portrait or family photo. I'm going to now give it a title of Marion Agatha Emily DIERCE/Rivers. Place, I don't really know. Well, the place the photography was done was Christchurch. Date, yeah, is that in 1894, 1895. So then I would put in a whole description, which I will have typed up beforehand. But in this case, I'm not going to have enough time to do that with you guys here. So I'll do that behind the scenes, and that will get added in to the family tree. Now, the biggest thing that happens with this project is finding the spot to stop. Okay, we're all really good, passionate family historians. How far is too far? And How far should we go? It's really easy just to keep going and going and going, but I might have 50 other documents that I want to do the same thing too. And so at some stage, it's really, really cool to actually stop and go, right, that's enough, that if someone wants to come along and find it. This family is fascinating. There are a whole lot of cool things to go and find about this family on the internet and doing research. And I'm seeing some fantastic things that people are putting up in the chat as they go along, and some great links to some other different bits and pieces. I'll put a couple of those, in particular the name change I'll probably put on here, because in the future, some of the descendants may not know about that name change and how it came about and when it came about. So being able to put that in so that it links to both her names, I probably will do. But meanwhile, back over on the presentation that I was giving you, let's just flick back up. So you can see where the Memories in Time project has come from. You can see how addictive the Memories in Time project is. But what happened to that great big sack that we saw at the very start of documents? Well, this is what happened. So this Facebook post, as I said, went up, and lots of people came on with some really good advice. And one of the suggestions was to contact the local museum. And that's what the poster has done. They've contacted the museum and they're really interested in it, because this is social history through the 40s, 50s and 60s of the different shops that are in the area, of the different things that were happening in the area. So it doesn't just pertain to the family that actually collected the documents. It actually contains history and social history of the area itself. And so hopefully those will be getting there at some stage, probably hampered by lockdown, of course. So what can you do? You know, we all do collect these things. So what can you do with those? Well, if space is becoming an issue for you, then start looking at digitization. You can scan them, etc. Share them with your family. You know that my big passion is to make sure that things aren't just kept on our computers. We need to get them out there and into the hands of all the other family members that are out there as well, so that they have the opportunity to share them with their descendants. And I'm also looking at how we can share them for the future. The Memories in Time project is just one way of doing that and helping them to be shared with others. And also contact your local libraries and museums, because quite a few of them will take some social history back into their collection. Now, they may only take a digitized version, because just like you, they have space issues as well. However, isn't that better than no saving at all? Now, if you've enjoyed playing along like this, we do this quite often, Michelle and I, or me in particular, because I'll bring the things up, at Talking Family History, which is a chat show that we have every couple of weeks. So you can come and sign up to our mailing list at talkingfamilyhistory.com. If you want that code again for the vivid pics, I'll leave this up on the screen for a few minutes. But if you want to contact me, you can do that through Memories in Time. Just flick me an email. If you want to have a chat, I do free 15-minute chats with people. So yeah, you can book in for one of those.